And while everyone's getting situated, Rodney, why don't you come on up and welcome us into this lovely space?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. I do want to welcome you all to Strawbery Bank. We are very excited to have you here today. This is the new record for this space, but I think we all fit pretty well, so get to know each other very well for sure. My name is Rodney Rowland. I'm the Director of Facilities and Environmental Sustainability at Strawbery Bank. I've been here for a little over 30 years, so Strawbery Bank is very, very important to me. As you'll learn later, we've got some significant challenges due to water that we're rapidly trying to address. Strawbery Bank is a 9-acre site with 37 historic buildings. Most of the buildings are on their original locations. So that's one of the things that makes us a unique outdoor living history museum. We didn't create the neighborhood, it's always been here. We interpret the entire evolution of this neighborhood from pre-settlement by the Europeans all the way through to 1955. The museum was incorporated in 1958. So that's a brief recap of our mission. Unfortunately, I was unable to get you all tickets today, not that you're going to have a lot of time anyway. But you are welcome to take a little walk around the grounds at lunch if you want to. Our staff will ask you about your tickets and just say that you're not going in anywhere, you just want to take a look around. There is an invitation. My talk just after lunch is going to be about the Penhallow House, which you can see is under construction right outside the window here. You're welcome to go visit with the crew that's over there, and they can give you any more information about what we're doing over there in terms of groundwater mitigation. So. Some logistics, the bathrooms are at the end of the hall, past the ticket desk, take a right. I think everybody has the Wi-Fi password somewhere. If not, it is posted above the ticket desk on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. You can grab it there. Our hours of operation today and every day are 10 to 5. So, we're not quite open yet, but will be by 10 o'clock. I'm going to be in and out all day today. Anybody have any questions, feel free to stop me. There'll also be a staff member at the ticket desk all day, and you can ask them any questions you might have. I think that's all I have. So welcome. Looking forward to a great conference.
Hey, thank you, Rodney. Okay, welcome. We are at the 2024 New Hampshire Coastal Adaptation Climate Summit. It's so incredible to see you all here today. I'm Kirsten Howard. I'm one of CA's 2 co-chairs. I'm also the Resilience Program Coordinator for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Coastal Program. And I'm joined over here by my other co-chair, Abigail Lyon, who is the Community Engagement Program Manager for the Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership, or PREP. Thanks for being such a great co-chair, Abigail. So this is the 11th time that CA has hosted a climate summit. And I think that this will be my 9th summit, if I counted correctly. Can you all raise your hands if this is the first time that you have ever been to a CA Climate Summit? Awesome, that's amazing. I just want to say we're super honored that you found us and that you're here today, and just extend a really big welcome to all of you who are joining us for the first time, and those of you who are coming back, of course. So in reflecting a little bit about what CA Climate Summits have meant to me over the 9 that I've participated in, I think what's been consistent is that they're a concentrated chance for all of us to grow together. Each summit connects us with some new people. We learn from each other, and we take some new steps together. And yet, despite all of the growth that I've been privileged to be part of, somehow every time it still feels to me like our work is kind of just getting started, like it's still ahead of us, like it's still on the horizon. And I think maybe that's just the nature of the work that's seeking to minimize harm from climate change and to create a more just world. We might just always feel like we're reaching for some progress. I feel so lucky to be back here together with all of you today to grow and to reach with you. let's begin with our land acknowledgement. So we gather here today at Strawbery Banke Museum, which is within the traditional homelands of the Abenaki people, who have ongoing cultural and spiritual connections to this area. We acknowledge the land and the peoples who have stewarded it through the generations. For many of us in the Coastal Adaptation Work Group, our work is place-based on land that continues to be unceded. And our work is also relationship-based with people, with nature, and with resources. And we humbly offer a land acknowledgement with recognition that we must continue to learn about our obligations as guests on this land. And today, let's manifest that recognition by asking the hard questions about how we can be in good, right relationship with the work. Now I'm going to ground all of us in Ka's work and take a few minutes to recognize the incredible effort that went into making today possible. Ka strives to assist communities in New Hampshire's coastal watershed to prepare for the impacts of extreme weather and long-term climate change by providing resources, facilitation, and guidance that enhance readiness and resilience. Through this work, Ka envisions a resilient coastal watershed where all human communities and natural ecosystems can adapt, thrive, and reach their full potential in a changing climate. This past year, Ka members worked together to develop for the first time ever a set of guiding principles. These have been super helpful, deeply helpful when we've had questions, when we've dealt with some sticky challenges, and also when we want to celebrate success. The principles are: Ka creates community, Ka is adaptive, Ka values data, Ka invests in process, Ka catalyzes action, and Ka embraces complexity. And we can show you where you can learn a little bit more about those. Today, Ka is a collaborative of more than 70 people from more than 35 organizations. Ka and its members provide consistent and coordinated capacity to communities in this area that tend to be small in population, governed by small staffs, many volunteers, and are facing compounding challenges. I'd like to recognize our Ka and Climate Summit sponsors who helped make this day accessible to anyone who wanted to join. A special thank you to sponsors Hydro Predictions and Horsley Witten Group for their very generous support today. Next, we have to recognize the summit planning team. It is no small feat to put on an event like this one. The finesse and adaptability of this crew is unparalleled. I don't think I've ever seen a group navigate a hiccup like a last-minute venue change with such calm, collected grace. I'm not sure that they would like me to advertise their skills as crisis managers, but you now know their names and their faces, and their contact information is in the packet that you received in your email, so I can't control what you do with that information. Thank you to all of you on the planning team. And a huge thank you to Rodney and Strawbery Banke for helping us out when we were in need of this last-minute venue. Rodney, we're so deeply grateful for your leadership, for your partnership, and your can-do-anything attitude. And a big thank you as well to the Great Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, or GBNR, for trying really hard to make it work at their site after some unexpected air conditioning failures. We hope things cool down over there soon. Thanks also to the Strawbery Banke volunteers and the GBNR volunteers who are helping us today. Okay. I'm now also going to recognize our program committee. This group dedicated time to developing our thrilling agenda today. We'll get to the agenda in a minute, but before we do, I have to especially recognize Lucy Perkins, who you'll notice appeared on both planning and program committee teams. Lucy is New Hampshire's, she's back there in the corner over there, New Hampshire's NOAA Coastal Management Fellow. She captained the Climate Summit ship. For those of you who know Lucy even a little bit, you most likely have picked up on what a privilege and a joy it is to work with her and alongside her. Please join me in a round of applause for Lucy. Okay, so here is the program for today. It is also up on a poster in the back of the room. And you should have received it in an email from Abigail yesterday around noon. So you can poke around through those links as well. We have a really terrific group of speakers and artists who are sharing their skills, their knowledge, their time, and their vulnerability with you all today. Following our development of cause guiding principles last year, COM members got together to create a set of 5-year intentions. We have been really busy the last year. This was kind of our version of a 5-year plan, but we didn't call it a 5-year plan. And today's content is organized around 3 of those intentions. Advanced knowledge and the field. We will hear about new knowledge gained about groundwater rise, high tide flood water quality, some reflections on the nexus of art and climate science specifically, and that accompanies the incredible works of art around the room that I'm hoping you'll take some time to take a look at during the breaks. We're also going to try out a pop-up session in this advanced knowledge session, where anyone here is invited to pop up and share a little bit about what they're up to. So be thinking about what you might share in that. The second intention that we're focusing on today is catalyze principled climate adaptation. This year we actually have several presentations about how understanding history is one key to preserving, and in some cases undoing harm, to make the built environment, to make cultural indigenous heritage, and to make ecosystems more resilient to climate change. That will be pretty interesting. And we have a session focused on Evolve Our Practice. And actually Evolve Our Practice has shown up in a few ways in our program. We took a tour guided and led by the Black Heritage Trail yesterday. Some of us joined that, which helped us to learn about Portsmouth and the area's history and economic dependence on the slave trade, and the incredible community that was created as Black people in this area began to be freed, or began to come into their freedom and their power. Our keynote speaker session and the final session of the day both are rooted in Evolve Our Practice and focus on how we can expand and challenge our thinking to create meaningful change. I am personally super excited to hear from Julie Wormser of the Mystic River Watershed Association. I followed their work as a neighbor for a while. And that will be just after we enjoy popsicles during the break. So keep that in mind. So speaking of intentions, cost summits have always been intentionally fast-paced. Just enough to pique your interest, and the resource packet and the contact list that you received give you the information you need to dig deeper. So keep that in mind today. All the presentations are also being recorded, and you'll be able to access them online after the event. Now you all should have access to note cards. I think they're taped to the back of some chairs. And I'm going to ask you all to pull one out right now if you don't have one in front of you. These are for tracking your questions and your observations throughout the day today. In the spirit, again, of 5-year intentions, we'll do a daily intention to start us out. So if you have a pen, that would also, or a pencil, that would also be helpful. We're going to take the next minute to set one intention for today. And I want you to write it or draw it on your note card. Okay, so we hope that you find some opportunities for growth in the stories that you hear today, the presentations, the art that you see today. It's all being featured about local climate impacts and how communities are adapting to changes in the region and beyond. And to kick us off, to share introductions to and remarks from New Hampshire's congressional delegation, please welcome my fellow co-chair and our master of ceremonies today, Abigail Lyon.
Thank you, Kirsten. Just to offer a reflection too, it's really wonderful to see you all laughing and smiling and being really collegial and friendly with one another in a single space. So great to see you all today. So before we begin today's program, I'm honored to welcome representatives from New Hampshire's federal delegation to share remarks on the crucial importance of climate resilience in our state. Please join me first in welcoming Elizabeth McKenna from Senator Shaheen's office to the podium for a few words.
Good morning. Senator Shaheen wishes she could be with you all today. She's leading a delegation on foreign travel. Otherwise, she would certainly want to be here. But I'm Elizabeth. I cover her environment portfolio for her. So if you ever have questions, I'm a good person to reach out to and connect with. Just share a few points of things she's been working on. Senator Shaheen has long championed efforts to respond to climate change and enhance resilience of coastal communities. It wasn't too long ago that she was visiting at Gibner and met with some municipal leaders around Great Bay to talk about all the work together from residents, watershed communities to local, state, federal leaders to address challenges related to climate change here on the seacoast. And then just last year ago, she was here in Portsmouth, partnering with Strawbery Banke at the Keeping History Above Water conference, where she provided remarks, where she just sees those two things fitting nicely together of ways that we should be thinking and addressing our climate change. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act made historic investments in combating climate change and enhancing the resilience of our infrastructure and our communities. In the first 3 years of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, New Hampshire has seen more than $250 million to address water infrastructure, including projects that will enhance watershed health and flood resiliency. As a lead negotiator of that bill, she was proud to steer investments that will benefit New Hampshire's communities for decades to come. And as chair of the appropriations subcommittee that funds the Department of Commerce, including NOAA, she's long championed investments in coastal resiliency specifically. The Inflation Reduction Act provides $2.6 billion through NOAA for coastal communities and climate resiliency. The law also invests in disadvantaged communities that often bear the brunt of pollution and climate impacts. With the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, there are more resources than ever for New Hampshire's communities to fight climate change and build resiliency. And it's so admirable to see these dollars already heading into the state. And it's been wonderful to learn about the projects already taking place and the investments being made by people right here in this room. Senator Shaheen will continue working to provide federal support necessary to carry on all of your efforts. So please do not hesitate to reach out to her or myself if we can work together or be helpful in any way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and please extend, thank you, our gratitude to Senator Shaheen as an organization who benefits directly from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law funding and works really hard to get that funding in the ground in our communities. I thank you so very, very much. Senator Hassan extends her regrets as well for not being able to attend today's climate summit, but has provided a letter that she's asked that I read on her behalf. She writes, "Dear friends, I'm sorry I can't be with you for the 2024 Coastal Adaptation Work Group Climate Summit. I want to thank the organizers and everyone attending today's event for your commitment to tackling climate change. New Hampshire's beautiful coastline is beloved by Granite Staters. It provides critical research opportunities that enrich our understanding of our marine environment as we train the next generation of marine scientists at our colleges and universities. It also supports our local fishing and aquaculture economy while attracting countless visitors to our state every year, making it an important contributor to our travel and tourism sector and is a wonderful place to call home. As you know, climate change poses an existential threat, in particular to coastal communities. In recent years, strong storms have threatened homes, small businesses, and infrastructure on New Hampshire's seacoast. It is essential that we continue to work together to combat climate change and ensure that our communities are more resilient and prepared for the future. Your collaborative approach to bolstering coastal resiliency is vital to that mission. Thanks in parts to the advocacy of Granite Staters, we're able to pass the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which, among other things, makes important investments in strengthening coastal resiliency, including for New Hampshire's seacoast. It is critical that we continue to build on these efforts, and I encourage you to use today's summit as an opportunity to continue to learn from one another and envision a brighter future for our state and our country. Thank you to everyone who made today's event possible. I look forward to continuing to work together to meet this moment in the climate crisis so that our citizens economy, and environment can thrive for generations to come. Let's see. Okay. Finally, I'd like to welcome and acknowledge Gage Wheeler, who's joining us here in the room today from Congressman Pappas's office. Gage will be around this morning and is hoping to connect with many of you to learn about your projects, your challenges, and ways he and the congressman can support your critical work. Thank you again to Senator Shaheen, Senator Hassan, and Congressman Pappas for their steadfast dedication and unwavering commitment to support climate resilience here in New Hampshire. With that, that's enough from me. I'd like to welcome Alyson Eberhardt to the stage, who will introduce our keynote and facilitate our discussion this morning. Alyson.
Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here with you today. My name is Alyson Eberhardt, and I use she, her pronouns. And I have the incredible honor of introducing you to our keynote speaker, Kate O'Brien. It feels particularly wonderful and a little surreal because Kate has been a very close friend of mine for over 25 years. Kate has recently been working with us as a coach on the Flood Ready Neighborhoods program, which you'll hear about later today. Those of us in the FERN program were faced with questions, as we are today, such as, what does community-centered work look like? How do we advance equitable coastal adaptation and climate resilience? How do we evolve our practice? And I can think of no better person to support us in answering those questions than Kate. Kate has the credentials. She has experience in social work, a graduate degree in urban planning and environmental policy. She's led transformative community-centered projects as executive director of Groundwork Lawrence. Then she moved on to their national organization, Groundwork USA, where she built trust-based partnerships around equitable brownfield redevelopment and environmental justice outcomes, and she did that across the nation. And she is the founder and principal of Catalyst Collaboratives. I've glossed kind of quickly over Kate's experience, given its breadth and depth, because more than her credentials or accomplishments, I'd like to share some of Kate's attributes that make her so effective at her work. Although I do encourage you to read Kate's full bio. It's quite impressive. Supporting people to question long-held beliefs and approaches is not simple work, but Kate does so incredibly effectively. Kate models bringing her whole self to her work and supports us to do the same. Kate leads with humility. Her work is coaching, not critique. She fosters opportunities for us to continually learn and make mistakes in a space that's both safe and accountable. And Kate has a nuanced approach to kindly sharing ideas, even when they're uncomfortable, to guide you to a better answer. I can think of multiple examples where our FERN team was determining next steps or troubleshooting challenges. And Kate let us travel down our path of thinking, trusting us and gently nudging us along the way so that we had arrived at an answer that aligned with our values and our principles. It's this skill to support us to arrive at a better answer rather than giving it to us that is the true heart of their work. Kate is incredibly gifted with language, so I'll share their own words to describe the work they currently do. As a white cis het woman working alongside colleagues and communities of colors and cultures, Kate has spent over 20 years building bridges across difference, nurturing authentic relationships, and reflecting deeply on the ways power, privilege, and identity intersect and influence systems, interactions, and outcomes. Kate relates these experiences and perspectives to her clients, encouraging them to do their own deep work and leveraging the synergy created, and this is my very, very favorite part, when human beings come together to connect, co-create, and be in communities of care and belonging. And so with incredible joy and respect, I'm excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Kate O'Brien.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see you all here. In addition to seeing me standing before you, you see an allergy attack in full process. Much like climate change, it's not convenient. So if I'm a little sniffly, no, I bring my full self, as Alyson said, to my work, including my allergies this morning. Alyson, thank you for your gracious introduction and your warm handoff. I appreciate you. Let's take a moment to start with some breaths. We're in shared space today. So feel free to close your eyes if that's available to you and if it's comfortable. Take a breath in. There's a lot of heaviness in the world. And as you breathe out, we think about all the systems, the structures, the ways of doing and thinking and being all around us that are being exposed, ones that were never intended to be nourishing or generative for human beings. Take another breath in. And as you're breathing out, conjure up an image of someone in your mind upon whose shoulders you stand. Maybe it's someone known or unknown to you, someone smiling and proud, someone who enabled you to be on this planet, in this room. As you breathe in, feel your chair beneath you, supporting you, doing its job. As you breathe out, think about your purpose, your why for doing climate work. As you breathe in and breathe out, continue to receive my invitation to just be here. You're welcome to flutter your eyes open. Over the course of the day today, I know that we are going to hear and share a whole lot about the what. What's the nature of the work we're doing out in the field? What challenges are we trying to solve? We will dive in together to learn and share what we're doing in response to climate change. And thank goodness we are all here together. Yes, we came to learn and share, but I invite you today, picking up on the spirit of things that Abigail and Kirsten shared already this morning, immerse yourself in the idea we came here to deepen our relationships and our interconnection amongst us, to learn and share this important life's work. Because climate change work is not easy. We are between a rock and a hard place. We need to be able to lean on each other to keep going, to endure and grow around the grief that we feel and the grief that we bear witness to in those with whom we are working. We need to stay connected to one another. We need to remain whole in this task, this uphill, pushing a boulder uphill, if you will, to realize meaningful and lasting change in our world. So this morning, I'm going to talk less about what and the more about how. How will we do our work? And okay, I'm just going to say it. Today, I'm going to talk about love. I know maybe you weren't expecting to hear this at the CAW Climate Summit. Perhaps you were expected to hear something slightly different given the title of my talk. But for a long time, I've been feeling called upon to show up in different ways, to support others showing up in different ways than ever before. I've come to realize that talking about love as an action word, verb, not a noun, and acting in ways that are loving, no matter what the context, is imperative in these times. So we'll explore this together this morning. Last year, the Climate Action Work Group journeyed to grow and develop and put on paper its 5-year intentions document, which included, ooh, I was already pushing buttons, look at that. These beautiful guiding principles: creating community, being adaptive, valuing data, investing in process, catalyzing action, embracing complexity, valuing data. Another word for principle is fundamental truth. You don't get much more rock solid than that in an age of uncertainty. Along with those goals and strategies for catalyzing its work, the first of these intentions, where I'll focus most of my remarks today and my work with CAW over the next year and a half, is to evolve our practice. Pause, learn, and grow in ways that expand and challenge our thinking individually and collectively so that we can affect meaningful and long-lasting change. Such a humbling intention. So if I were to generate a short list of key questions, I would suggest we ritualize in an effort to evolve our practice. They would go something like this. Behaviors. How will we demonstrate to those around us that we're living into our principles? Norms and rituals. What habits will help us normalize, integrate, and expect these behaviors of ourselves and each other in our day-to-day? Mindsets and heart sets, because this is not just mind work, this is heart work, right? What mental and emotional models will help us hold ourselves and each other accountable? As we think about equitable adaptation, because we are, I want to tell you about, we're thinking about not just journaling, right, with a cup of tea in the warm sunshine, or not just that anyway, right? I hope there is reflection and contemplation practice. But I'm talking about normalizing asking yourself and each other those kinds of questions frequently. Keep circling back to them. Make it a habit, a shared practice. I don't intend to do all the talking this morning. I want to have a few moments where you all connect with one another. I know you did a little bit of that with intention setting. So I'd like each of you to turn to your neighbor and share your why. Why are you at the CLAW Climate Summit today? Before you turn to your neighbor, though, take a few moments to reflect. Really gather your thoughts. Grab a pen and some paper. I know many of you have that convenient now. I'd like you to jot down a word or few words or key phrases. And I want you to write this down because I'm going to ask you to refer back to this, refer back to your written notes when we get to that chatting with your neighbor part. So a few key words, maybe a couple phrases. And there's one other key instruction that I want to give you before you start. Apologies for the interruption if you've already gotten your flow. When you write your notes about your why, please use your non-dominant hand to write. Just like 5 or 6 sentences or, keywords. I'll give you a minute. I'm going to assume some of the giggling is because while writing with your non-dominant hand, are you ready to go or do you need some more time? Okay. Well, maybe I'll just continue to interrupt you and say, I'm sorry that I made an assumption because I only have 25 minutes. I didn't start my timer, but I'm going to try to stick to my time. I assume that switching to your non-dominant hand to write down your thoughts would be easy, that you'd be able to switch and just adapt and take the same amount of time as using your dominant hand. This gets me to my first mindset shift example. If we're talking about equitable adaptation, I want to have us look at cause evolving definition. Lucy, thank you for working on this. I know this is a work in practice. When we were exchanging emails about let's brighten, let's fine tune, what do we mean when we are talking about equitable adaptation? Recognizing that individuals and communities face different challenges and hold different assets that deserve different levels and types of support. Given that it's imperative we consider people's unique identities, perspectives, and needs and uplift their strengths so they have an equal opportunity to prepare or respond. So my instructions, me asking you to quickly adapt on the fly, writing using your non-dominant hand, include an inherent assumption that your capacity to adapt quickly was high, that such a switch would be quick and easy. You'd be able to perform the task as you would normally without challenge and be able to do it in the same amount of time. Zoom back for a moment. How did it feel when I sprung that twist and instructions on you? When I was like that non-dominant hand part? Did it feel abrupt? Maybe unfair? Ludicrous? I actually sat in a workshop where this took place. Dr. Ahmed, now he's a co-superintendent at Portland Public Schools where I live in Maine. He's from the African continent and has lived his life as an immigrant in the United States and was working with coaching other people on what does it mean to work with people whose English is not their first language, who've come to this country under conditions of duress or stress or fear, persecution. And it was really important for us to think about what that experience might feel like. So I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you're sitting in this audience and I just gave you all those instructions, but English is not your first language. That quick time-bound prompt to adapt your writing with your non-dominant hand, how might those required adjustments feel for you if English is not your comfort language? How quickly would you be able to move from hearing the instructions, interpreting them in your head, reflecting on your thoughts and feelings to the actual question, the what's your why? Then in your head, translate that why from your primary language into English, then writing that down. And on top of that, if you're not dominant hand, no big deal, just take a minute. Did your brain just melt a little too? Because mine did. How doable might that adapted task feel for someone who has a physical disability and is unable to use their other hand to write, or either hand at all? What about someone who lives with sensory processing disorder or the pain of arthritis and they can't endure the pain of holding a pen to paper? How might my requests become more universally accessible? So in order to be equitable, to make things more equitably adaptable and accessible, we need to step into another person's shoes, many other shoes, in fact, to gain different perspectives. So we might recognize the different challenges, the different assets a person holds. So we might reflect and respond with differentiated, some would say individualized, consideration of the ways you might invite different ways of doing or different ways of knowing. That will take much more time, right? It's less efficient or streamlined. And we would hold an expectation and space for folks' agency so that they can respond in ways that are meaningful and fitting for them in their context. So that each person's unique requirements and uplifting their strengths so they have an equal opportunity to prepare. In other words, I'm talking about not assuming that what's true for me is true for everyone else. Perspective taking can help us be more attuned to other people's lived experience, worldviews, and realities. It can help make us and what we have to offer other people more relevant. It helps us see value in what other people and their many ways of being and knowing and doing that are different from ours. And it's helping us build deeper possibilities for many different kinds of people to feel like they belong. Okay, so now I totally interrupted the instructions. Take a moment to turn to your neighbor, introduce yourself, and share a bit about your why. I will ask you to be a little quick about it. I will set a timer for 2 minutes. So take a moment to really connect. And if you're like in an end of a row, just like adapt. So there may be 2 or 3 of you, right? You all want to talk to one another. This is so awesome. So I have an assignment. Well, did you learn something interesting about your neighbor? First of all, just show of hands. Yep. Did you exchange contact information already? Okay. You were just chit-chatting, that's okay. I want to have you make a point. So after like the break between now and the next session, take a moment, if you do business cards or whatever, exchange at very least an email. Because I'm going to give you a little assignment here. You had a shared experience just now, and you told someone about your why, so you're accountability buddies. This is how we do our work. We center relationship. We pour into one another, thereby pouring into ourselves. So our assignment today, if I tell the entire room, it's not going to be awkward when you approach someone later, right? You have to make a plan to reconnect with your neighbor at some point during the day today, ideally towards the end of the day. Make a point to follow up. How do I have 3 number ones? What is going on? That did not say it like that, I swear. Can't have 3 number ones. Make a point to follow up. If you reconnect, like somebody might have to go pick up their child from day camp or take an elder to an appointment, all of that's okay. Make a point to follow up with an email when you're back at your desk. Ask each other if your why got fulfilled today and how it happened. Get into details. You don't have to just follow up once. You can follow up more than once. So you're connected with someone. You already check that box. Okay. I did promise to talk about love, so now I'm going to turn us in that direction a little bit. When I was reflecting back, and I want to reflect back to you, all that I have been seeing and hearing and feeling as I've been sitting with cause, beautiful intentions, and guiding principles to prepare for this talk. What I see, hear, and feel in that beautiful and thoughtful body of work is love. Love of self, love of fellow humans, love of ecosystems, love of our earthly home. And woven through the fabric of that loving document are the words and sentiments and feelings of those who contributed to it. Lifting up beautiful facets of humility, vulnerability, curiosity, integrity, a growth mindset, honesty, intentionality. These ways of being loving, are essential to the work of creating lasting change. I'll explain by echoing and lifting up the words of American culture critic, scholar, theorist, and writer Bell Hooks. The word love is most often defined as a noun, yet we would all love better if we used it as a verb. She says, were we to understand love as an action word, then we could, in her words, understand love as the will to nurture our own and another's spiritual growth. I know, I'm standing here in the front of a room filled with academics and practitioners and scientists who have been trained to utilize logic and reason and the scientific method in their work. And here I'm talking about love and spiritual growth. Thank you. I know you may be questioning my assertion and my use of the word spiritual. I do get it. And yet, when Bell Hooks references spirituality, what she's describing is actually embedded in the evolve our practice intention. Spirituality is the dimension of our core reality where mind, body, and spirit are one. If you're still doubting, stick with me. She goes on. An individual does not need to be a believer in a religion to embrace the idea that there is an animating principle in the self, a life force. Some call it soul, that when nurtured, enhances our capacity to be more fully self-actualized and able to engage in communion with the world around us. So I just use very religious associated words, right? Communion, self-actualization. Self-actualization is kind of like nerdy psychological concept, right? I'm social sciences. To reach our fullest potential. That phrase was already conjured up this morning before I got up here. Exchanging or sharing or intimate thoughts or feelings, especially on a spiritual or mental level. This existential crisis work requires this deep, deep work. It requires us to get into deep reserves of our souls. What does it mean to be a human being and show up? What does it mean to be thinking about the future when we have no control over the future? So I want to ask you, wouldn't it feel like soul nourishment to make space and time to actually pause, learn, and grow? How often are you granted this opportunity to seek and find true nourishment in your work life? So I need to ask you, do you believe you could pause, learn, and grow on your own? I'm not doubting you, I'm just wondering. Could you pause, learn, and grow without being vulnerable enough to examine, interrogate, admit, and share your innermost thoughts or feelings, even and especially if they're uncomfortable? Could one become self-actualized? Could you realize your full potential by your lonesome? Is it possible to exchange and expand and challenge our own thinking in a vacuum? I say no. We humans need each other. We become better versions of ourselves when we're surrounded by people who are invested in helping us be better and do better. To evolve our practice, we need each other all the more. Despite what our society's dominant capitalist culture would lead you to believe, we humans are interdependent. We are not the bootstrapping individuals striving to make it at any cost, at the expense of our fellow human, survival of the fittest. Nope. We're wired for connection, for cooperation. Capitalism and its proponents have sold us a bill of goods. We have to stop buying it if we are seeking true nourishment, continual growth, and evolution of ourselves and our practice. Moreover, the ways in which we approach our work will need to look different because the ways we have been working just haven't been up to the task. Not a critique, just reality. We find ourselves exhausted seeking an illusory magic silver bullet. There's no one single way to solve complex, interconnected, wicked challenges or problems, or to navigate power dynamics and entrenched ways of thinking and doing that no longer serve. Climate change is calling on us to respond differently than we ever have before, in ways we haven't even seen yet, so that we can stop perpetuating inequity and realize radically different outcomes. So we can create a world in which no one human or group of people is more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change than any other, especially not on the basis of race or class or other protected identity. So whether we're talking about thinking and evolving our practice or springing into action to help our neighbors in the aftermath of the disaster brought on by another 500-year storm, I'm talking about doing it with love. Love at the center of everything we do, at the home, at the office, in line at the grocery store, with our children out in nature. Love. What the late congressman and lifelong activist John Lewis called beloved community. I've worked in an organization that actually had some loving elements built into it, and I want to tell you a little bit about it. It was far from perfect. It had its brokenness, it had its challenges, it had its grief, but it did have loving practices woven into the fabric of the organizational culture and the practice. And it was formative for me because I first encountered it at the very beginning of my professional career, and I've been surprised by how little I've seen it since. When I started my career as a social worker at age 22, I was a year out of college. I had been assigned a caseload of over 100 people working and living with severe and persistent mental illness. I was in charge of the kitchen unit at a voluntary day treatment program. It was an opt-in program for adults who needed community, and they were unable to hold full-time jobs for the most part because of their illness. We would shop for groceries together and cook meals together for the community every day. It was where I learned to cook for an army. It was also where I learned that I could be humbled and heartbroken by the reality of the world that I thought I knew so much about. I wasn't earning a ton of money. In fact, it wasn't even a living wage, but it was a position that was rich in hands-on learning opportunities. Some might say I was being served water from the Niagara Falls volume spigot. Too much, too fast, too soon. I quickly learned that the people in my charge needed support in their daily life skills, yes, but they also needed moral support and encouragement to keep trying to navigate healthcare systems that were overwhelmed and set up to fail them. The part of the job that stuck with me was the fact that I was expected, I was required to receive supportive supervision. Every other week, I was required to see a therapist in order to process what I was experiencing as a care provider. Imagine at age 22, grown adult out on my own, someone who is not my parent was paid and dedicated to look out for me, to make sure I could stay whole as I did my work. It was an incredibly challenging job, but the safety net of supportive supervision, a safety net that ultimately helped me find my particular career path as a helper to change makers, was a workplace norm I found comforting and safe. That feeling stuck with me. I've tried to ensure that it gets replicated in every organization I've consulted to since. No one's taken me up on it yet, but I'm still going to keep trying. As part of that effort, I wanted to go back to the 3 questions about the behaviors and norms and rituals and the heart set and mindsets. There are some behaviors, norms, and rituals and heart sets and mindsets that I want to share with you that I think will be beneficial for continually evolving your practice. I want to share those now. These are in no particular order. I was like, I'm going to start with the top 10, and then I came up with 12. So These are meant to be beautifully visually captivating. So well, that was a really tall, I'm really selling this, aren't I? I will share the slides after because I want you all to spend some more time than we're able to probably today. This work requires us to assume a humble growth mindset. See that comfort zone in the center of the dark circle? Our job is to continually move out of that comfort zone. You kind of freak out, you pass through the fear zone, but you got to keep going to get to that learning, that stretch zone, that growth zone. We all have something to learn. And the growing and changing might be uncomfortable, and I want to normalize, keep going. Identify, name, and share your feelings. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a social worker. I'm also saying it because I'm a mother. I'm also saying it because I'm a human. And we need to share our feelings. We need to get precise. This feelings wheel, you can go like Google feelings wheel. Not right now. It's a beautiful tool. I have it printed out in color in my house. It's a copy in the bathroom. It's laminated. It helps us be vulnerable when we can be more precise. If you've seen Inside Out 2, all about the feelings. We're going there, people. We gotta be vulnerable with one another. We're not gonna get anywhere by doing the same things. Identity, positionality, and power matter in every context. Learn how yours impacts what you say, do, and believe. Your intent might differ from the way you're landing with other people. And it's important to learn how to reconcile that. See what's the closest to power in that circle? I'll say most of those things in the center of the circle, closest to the power, are parts of my identity. I have to use that power that I have for good. I'm not doing my job. I'm wasting my power. I'm wasting my privilege if I'm not using it for good. I urge you all to find your way. Seek to gain the perspectives that you're missing. We are all missing perspectives. If you dip into your Rolodex, most of us, white people, mostly know other white people. Just fact of the matter. We have to find different kinds of people who have different lived experiences so that we can gain those perspectives. I'm telling this to you all, you all know about biodiversity, right? It makes the ecosystem stronger. Diversity of perspectives, right? It makes our decision-making stronger. It informs with things that we were missing, things that we just didn't think about. And also the longer you're in something, right? The air you breathe, it's all normal. You don't realize you can't see it anymore. Sometimes you need fresh eyes. Keep nourishment, joy, and relationships at the center. This is one of the things I absolutely love about working with the Fern team. They got that. They had that in spades before I even walked in the door. Giving and receiving moral support, being authentically you in all the ways. Your relationships will move at the speed of trust. You can't force that. You can't put it on a timeline, but change happens because of relationships. You have to experiment. You have to be willing to take risks, be willing to fail. That is terrifying. My friend and colleague, Grace, Filipino woman, this is her favorite quote: no mud, no lotus. If you don't dig in the mud, you're going to have to get your elbows in your mud. You're never going to get that lotus, that beautiful flower. Normalize and embrace giving and receiving feedback. It's a gift. Especially when it comes from someone who's different than you. We really want to avoid conflict. We really don't want to be critiqued. We really take it as an opportunity to grow and change and shift. Because we're socialized, nice white people, we avoid conflict, right? We got to keep it all smooth. We don't want to have conflict. Conflict can be generative. We're missing out on growing and changing if we don't allow conflict to come into our life. We have to learn to stay grounded with it, right? Not lose our mind. Feedback culture at an organization, tremendously important. Not one annual review. It's a whole different way of doing business, people. Everyone wants to belong. I don't have time to go into this chart right now. So I want to encourage you. I'm going to send out the slides. I want you to sit with this. Bridging is really, really important. There's a really lovely interview with Dr. Robert Putnam, sociologist. He informs a lot of my work. I was a lot of undergrad. He talks about bonding is easy, right? It's connecting with people who are just like you. People on your softball team, your kickball team, or people in your church, or people, right? People in your neighborhood. Bridging is the ultimate difficult work. That's like stepping over a social boundary, like a social norm, right? Like across class, across race, across religions, across political beliefs. Bridging with another human being is the hardest work. That's the work we need to do. Be open to new ways of doing things and new and different ways of knowing. It sounds so obvious, but it's really, really challenging. We've always done it this way. It just feels comfortable. Our brains, we have known neural pathways, right? Our brains go on autopilot. That's totally normal. That's helped us survive. We have to disrupt that if we want to see change. Why are we always doing it this way? That's like one of my favorite questions, just like the breath of fresh air in the room. It's also really overwhelming. That's where this personal work is going to come in really handy. We are all leaders. Mickey Fern, my longtime mentor, he was many years at the National Park Service in the Obama administration. He said, leadership is assuming an intent of bringing out the best in those around you. You don't need a title. You don't need a C-suite. You don't need an executive in your title to be a leader. We are leaders. We are faced with leadership moments. We are invited into leadership moments every single day, all day long. How do I make the people around me better? How do I encourage them to help me be better? This is a tool from ProInspire. If you're not familiar, I'll drop some links into the slides. Incredible leadership work focused on racial equity and transformational organizational culture to get different kinds of people into organizations and to keep them there, to grow cross-cultural teams. Co-create, use, and regularly revisit your working agreement. This is an example of a working agreement, sometimes called a community norms agreement. I start off every meeting this way. We co-create it together as a team. We revisit it. We amend it as needed. It's a terms of engagement. How are we going to share space together? When someone steps out of bounds and something lands with me in a way that I need to talk to you about, I can call a timeout and say, I got to pause here. You interrupted me, and we have an agreement that we aren't going to interrupt one another. We need ways to share and hold our space together. The last one I want to share with you is that we all, regardless of our identity, and especially when we hold a white identity, we need to assume that it is lifelong, the journey to becoming an anti-racist person. We won't undo the harm happening in our society if we don't reconcile with our own identity as white people and our own responsibility to create changes. We can't wait around for people of colors and cultures to do this work. This is our work. This is our work. You can come see me after and I will talk to you about it for a long time. We all hold racist ideas, even me, even you, all of us. We are all socialized that way. I know some of these might seem like outlandish or audacious. I want to challenge your reaction to what I'm saying if that's the case. This work is challenging. It's going to require a sustained effort over many years. We will need to focus on the preconditions that will help us remain whole as we do our work. We're in it for the long haul, whatever it takes. We need to stay humble and nurture and be in right relationship with one another. We need to give and receive feedback. We need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and nurturing ourselves and one another as we seek new perspectives and prepare ourselves to endure so we can keep ourselves and our colleagues from burning out, to keep ourselves whole so we can show up for our families, our communities, so we can show up for justice and love and humanity. Imagine a society where every organization was framed with a prevailing expectation that we would act lovingly toward one another, that we were filled with people who set and minded their own preconditions for remaining whole in their day-to-day work, and they supported their colleagues and loved ones to do the same. What would our society look like? So I always leave with more questions than answers. Very on brand. So when you're journaling, during your all hands meeting, at your management check-ins, heck, during a heart-to-heart walk with a walking meeting with a colleague out in the heat fog, ritualize the kinds of questions and revisit them again and again. And this is how we come to normalize a practice of pausing, learning, and growing. So these are questions to sit with, and I will leave them in the slides so you can see them. It's with great joy and with purpose that I end my remarks here with more questions and answers. Please don't ever stop asking questions and seeking answers that propel you to continue pausing and learning and growing, and doing so and creating change in every context from a place of love. Thank you.
Hey, first of all, thank you so much for what you just brought to that address. It was beautiful and loving and hard-hitting and thought-provoking, and so I'm so grateful. And I have to share that I love your framing that your work is as a helper to change makers, as you know, and I'll share. A mentor of mine is Mr. Rogers. I adore Mr. Rogers and his teachings, and he always talks about looking to the helpers. And so when you framed it that way, I thought, yeah, I would too, Kate. Like, she's a helper. So I love that so much. So we now have about 25 minutes in discussion with Kate. And so I invite you to take some time now to give some thought and build some courage toward asking a question. Because it's kind of a small room, I think we'll just have you raise your hand and I'll indicate it's your turn. And then if you would just enunciate as best you can so that everyone can hear you. And then we can have some time in conversation with you. Austin.
I love your talk. I studied sociology at school. What is there a best way to get everybody on board? Some things like, for me, I have a kid and I agree with it, but I know it would be like a red flag, so shut down right away and here's certain things. But there's still going to be captive, they don't want to. So is there a way to train people? So I think we just manage, we sell, we talk. You know, your bottom line is important as they plan. How do we do this together? And then up here, how do we get to other places, not necessarily there? So this is important. How do we bring people together that definitely got 3 or might not 3? Is there a way to do that? There are a lot of people that are bored. That sometimes may not be for lots of reasons, but their life experience, you know.
Yeah. So I'll sort of summarize the question so folks can hear it on the mic. Thank you for this question. How to bring people along.
Yeah.
Maybe they're skeptical, maybe they're just not believers, or they don't see themselves in the work that you're trying to do. Yeah. I think I would start by saying, find your people who are on board with you, because you're going to need each other. You're going to need each other for the journey. And I think it's really important to really manage expectations on the timeline, because it will take longer than we want it to turn the ship, to right the ship. I also think we're in a society in an age where
we're drawn to the drama, right? We're drawn to the conflict, we see it in the media, right? It always has to be very dramatic and over the top and intense, and it draws our attention in. And sometimes I think that we design and try to convince people where there's high conflict, right? Like, we've got to convince this person, like, we're having a conflict, like, we're having a disagreement, but like, we're not seeing eye to eye, and we drift and spend all of our attention focusing on the haters, trying to bring the haters along, trying to bring the folks along that are skeptics. We will burn out if we focus on bringing along the skeptics. So what I would say is invest deeply in creating nourishing, fertile soil for the people who do get it, because it's not going to take one person, it's going to take groups of people. Right, so building for the leading edge, nurturing that leading edge of folks, we're like, we're headed in this direction, this is where we want to go. Bolstering them. Eventually the people who are the naysayers, either they come along or they fall away. We're not going to convince every single person, but by living and breathing into our own values and the truth that we know. Not like we're open to feedback, right? But we're headed forward, we're headed towards an anti-racist society, right? Like, not everybody's going to be on board right away. We have to be okay with that and focus on bolstering us. Super easy, right? Thank you.
So I think that it's so important, and I really appreciate like the whole leading with love and appreciating the different perspectives. But I personally am like super big picture thinker. So sometimes it's hard for me to figure out how to reconcile the fact that everybody's individual perspective or opinion on what is ideal is different. And then you're trying to move in a direction as a society that cannot on all of those individual perspectives. Do you have any just reflections or thoughts on I guess this whole conversation is sort of assuming that there's a right way to move forward, and that is not respecting everybody's different beliefs. So it's sort of what do you do?
Yeah, I did not say this, but the word is a paradox, right?
Yeah.
I think we have to normalize that there's complexity, that we can hold multiple truths in our hands at the same time. It's really challenging. I think I appreciate very much the big picture perspective, right? The globe and what we're facing is really monumental and challenging, right? And we're 8 billion people on the planet. And I think my experience has always been there should be ways efficiencies, right? Can't we just get to scale and get all the people, right? How can we reach a big bundle of people all at once? And social media has really helped us do that, right? The power of the age of the internet. And then I think at the end of the day, that allure of the efficiency of reaching masses of people all at once you're not actually reaching people. And so I go back to this one-to-one contact, leaning over the fence and talking to your neighbor. And you have to be okay with starting at a very, very small scale. It requires such an adjustment, and it also it requires such mental, emotional fortitude to accept that the scale is massive, and it has to be okay to start with a one-to-one relationship. I feel like I'm giving really dissatisfying answers. But I think that's a lot of the work is adjusting our own expectations and reality that it has to be okay to do this work in intimate relationship, because we have to pour into each other, right? Yeah. Can I say something? Yeah. So this isn't my thinking, this is me reflecting what we learned from Kate Rutherford. And I think a lot of it too is you don't know the right answer. You don't know the step forward. And what we've learned from Kate is, but you try something. And as long as it's aligned with your values, and aligned with your principles, and it's not knowingly causing harm, you try something.
And then you take it from there, and it's adaptive and iterative and very uncertain.
Thank you.
You're just sort of thinking about what you were talking about in terms of relationship building and, trust and growth at the speed of relationship building, and thinking about CAW and the work that we do here collectively, which is very local, right, and very place-based. And I think those two are very synergistic. So if we kind of accept that we're working at a scale that lends itself to the kind of relationship building that you're talking about. And I don't say ignore the global problems, but we work locally, think global, act local. That's what we're doing, and that's where our power is. So we embrace that. We have these relationships in our communities, with our people, with our agencies, with our ecosystem, and we build, locally and achieve what we can here. I think there's just a really beautiful kind of connection between the human scale and the geographic scale that helps us think about.
Thank you. I would agree, and I live in Maine, but I think it is, we have such small communities here, right? Like it's easy to get to know a lot of people, right? There's like a lot of social concentric circles that we can use to our advantage in this work, right? Like we can tap our networks and reach quite a big number of people who, right, we share this identity as a state or as a region. I completely agree. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll write off that between the two of you, what I heard about relationship is we talked a bit about relationship with ourselves, nurturing ourselves, and then also relationship with other. And then I heard you explicitly say, Melissa, relationship with the environment. And I love that framing of self, other, nature, planet, environment. I thought I see a hand back there. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for your words. So as I think we've been trying as a coalition, as a work group, to be more intentional, more thoughtful, more inclusive in our work, we're finding that sometimes the systems within which we work, like external funding, there's a rub with efficiency, which is prioritized and rewarded. So I'm curious, and I know you mentioned it, I'm curious if we are seeing those systems appreciate the time that it takes to be more inclusive and more thoughtful. Or maybe you have some advice about getting that message across.
Yes. It's really interesting. I spend a lot of time supporting grassroots organizations, trying to work with municipalities or state government to get these large federal, right? The bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, right? All of those, the unprecedented federal infrastructure dollars we're all hearing about. And what just really grinds me down, if I let it, is the fact that these small community-based organizations or entities that are doing really important work are having to contort themselves to be able to get the eligibility to receive federal funding. I'm gonna focus a little bit on federal funding, I don't need to, but that's really that's the wheelhouse where I see this the most right now. That these small organizations that are mission driven, doing incredible work, relationship work, small one-to-one, mutual aid in some cases, right? When the flood comes, they are setting aside what they're funded to do because they're making sure people have their basic meal out, or that they have power, or that they get food, or that the baby formula, right? The urgency that is needed. And I think that's really frowned upon, like the federal government and bureaucracy has been very, very rigid historically If you don't have a procurement policy, well, how are you gonna get these federal funds and use them? Well, if you're a one-woman show running a nonprofit organization in remote Appalachia, for example, this is a client that I worked with for 2 years. Fought so hard to get a $500,000 grant from the EPA. And then it took 9 months for us to come up with an administration and finance guidebook, a handbook that included things like procurement policy and budgeting and bookkeeping and all of these things that were required, right? This is federal, this is taxpayer dollars, right? We should be held accountable to how we're spending that money. And yet there was absolutely no adjustment on the part of the federal government to be able to say, wow, you're a small one-woman show doing mission-driven work on the ground. Like there was no middle ground. And so a lot of the support that I provided was, yes, we can create this guidebook, we can do an administration finance policy, procurement policy, we'll get you all to figure out how to hold all your records. But at the end of the day, what it took was meeting with the program officer repeatedly and me code switching between her small nonprofit language and the program officer looking at the rules and saying, you're not following the rules, we can't give you this money. You're in danger of losing this grant before you can get it. So I mention all that because I think there are organizations working to gather feedback, especially from CDOs and government at the local level, to give feedback to the FEMAs and the EPAs and say, if you really want this money to go to disadvantaged communities, there's going to have to be a little bit of adjustment in how that money flows into the communities, right? There's going to have to be an acknowledgement of reality. So I realize I took this at a very personal I think there's a lot of opportunities. There's some organizations I'd be happy to put you in touch with that are collecting this information and finding ways to build a case back to helping change the systems around, because it can't just be that we continue to flex and find a way.
Okay, I think we have time for one more. Kate, this has been wonderful. Thank you. Your discussion today. And I'm going to focus on the word love. And we all love our communities, we love our jobs, or we hopefully love our communities, we love our jobs, and that's why we're here today. How do you have any advice how we can take this to bridge our communities? I mean, we're here for all Maine and different communities in New Hampshire, but taking this back to our own little community, how do you have any advice as how we can get past that wheel of fear to get to the growth and the learning to the residents of our community for effective change? Do you have any suggestions how we can take this, bring it back to our workstations, bring it back to our work environment, bring it back to our coworkers, and expand upon this for a better result?
Thank you, and I love this question. I think the journey in cohorts or small groups is my passion, but I have found it to be the most successful way to get people really galvanized around an idea. So the stuff you're gonna laugh, right? Community potlucks, breaking bread together, developing learning circles, having focused discussion groups. Like if you have a book club, like a social justice book club, but don't stop at the book club, right? Like you gotta keep going. Like how do we reflect this in our own lives? Like really, it's like encouraging deep work, and it's not for everyone, right? Part of the invitation has to be, we are trying to do something transformational. We're reading a book not just for entertainment, but because we're trying to. If you're in it for spiritual growth, come join us. So like actually framing invitations for things with the word love in your agenda, like you gotta get explicit about it. The other thing I would do, I was on the board of a nonprofit in my community, and we had a standing agenda item we met board meetings every other month. There was a standing item in our agenda focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And they rotated every month, so someone could come and like lead a segment. It was like we could send out a piece in advance of a piece of reading or a podcast or something. But we were expected to hold discussion and like hold space for discussion or collective learning and sharing. And I think that ritual really helped people come to expect it and know they weren't just showing up at board meeting to look at the minutes and look, right, participate in Robert's rules and right, like do board business, yes, but an important part of the board business is the meander. See what I did there, the meander forever? Right, there's like this held space where we're going to explore these concepts where there's not one clear right answer. And normalizing that we can wrestle with challenging things, with existential threats, with our spiritual growth in community, in our workplace. Not like we're talking about religion in the workplace. We are talking about what does it mean to be an ethical human being, to hold space responsibly so that we can rise to meet the challenge of our times. Being explicit about it. Thank you.
I think that's time. So I will end with some gratitude to each of you for being here today, engaging in conversation, and then tremendous gratitude. It has been such an honor.